Chapter 18. Retraining. The more you sweat during peacetime, the less you bleed during war. U.S. military proverb. In the armed forces, a soldier never stops training, even after graduating from basic training and advanced occupational training and receiving all the awards and ribbons proving as much. A few months after my graduation ceremony, in preparation for my upcoming deployment to Iraq, my entire unit was shipped to Louisiana for a month of elaborate war games. Everything I would experience in combat would supposedly be simulated in the world's most expensive game of laser tag. Even the Humvees, attack helicopters, and Abrams tanks had laser sensors rigged to them. About 1 week into the mock war, I was shot in the arm. A medic dressed the pretend wound on my bicep and sent me back to my unit. A day later, while my platoon was chasing insurgents through the woods, I was killed along with one of my friends. Even my fake death was treated as the real deal. I had to lie still in the forest until my platoon finished the mission, placed me on a stretcher, and transported me to the morgue, where I would stay overnight until I magically came back to life and was sent back for more war games. Even though I had graduated training in the Fort Knox, Kentucky wilderness, I still had to undergo additional training in Louisiana. The preparation never stopped, even when I was walking in my duty as an Abrams tank crew member. Likewise, the wilderness period does not simply vanish upon a person's graduation into the purpose. Even though you may walk fully in whatever God created you to do, there will be circumstances when some additional time in the wilderness is required. There will be times when, spiritually speaking, God pulls you aside from the promised land to the wilderness to spend time with Him. Take for instance Jesus Christ. Long after his 40 days in the wilderness were over, while he walked in his destiny, he often would go back into the wilderness to spend time with the Father. So he himself often withdrew into the wilderness and prayed. Luke chapter 5, verse 16. When Christ first went into the wilderness, it was to be tempted by Satan. He was victorious in every assault. When this passage states he went into the wilderness to pray, this goes hand in hand with the first instance. Prayer is not only a method of spiritual communication, but it is also one's spirit food and flesh killer. Prayer is the Christian's weapon to strengthen oneself, and to help one resist temptation. Here is what Christ said to Peter in the Garden of Gethsemane. "Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again he went away and prayed. Mark chapter 14 verses 38 to 39. Christ himself was praying because the monumental task of his life was just hours away. He was about to be crucified. Satan was on the prowl trying to frighten Christ from fulfilling the most vital part of his mission on earth, death for the world's sins. When a soldier departs from the armed service for civilian life and then decides to return more than a year later, that soldier undergoes the same basic training all over again, as though he or she were a fresh recruit to retrain on skills that might have languished for lack of use. Moreover, even active duty soldiers return from deployment, they go back to the shooting range, to the shooting house, and to the Abrams tank range to retrain. In God's army, you will retrain as well. For example, take the OT prophet Elijah. Here was a man who helped raise the dead, called down fire from heaven, prophesied a drought that came to pass, and did many other miraculous things in the service of God. But after it all, when threatened by Israel's queen Jezebel, through a little handwritten note no less, he ran for his life. Mind you, Elijah had boldly faced down both the king and queen in the past, and called them out for their sins. For whatever reason, this time the prophet became crippled by fear after their last encounter. Listen to his state of mind after receiving the little note. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die and said, "It is enough. Now Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers." 1 Kings 19 verse 4. Elijah just wanted it to be over. Never mind his calling, which was to be the prophet of the Lord and overthrow King Ahab and Jezebel, and replace them with new monarchs. He wanted to quit, to die, and to be done with it all. What did God do in response to retrain Elijah on his fear, to get him to trust him again? To start with, God sent Elijah deeper into the wilderness. All the while Elijah fasted for 40 days and nights. Sound familiar? Christ was likewise led into the wilderness while fasting for 40 days in preparation for his temptation. The fasting was meant to starve Elijah's fearful flesh and strengthen his weakened spirit. Again, one of the uses of the wilderness is to purge God's people and fortify their trust in God. The following scripture details the next steps God took to help Elijah at the height of Elijah's fast. And there he went into a cave and spent the night in that place. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" In other words, God was saying, "Why are you in this position? Why do you not trust me anymore? We've faced much worse together." Then Elijah complains about the difficulty of the call and how abandoned he feels against such powerful political forces. God, seeing Elijah hadn't learned from the long fast, took matters further. Let's continue the account. Then he said, "Go out, and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. And after the wind an earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire. And after the fire a still small voice. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" 1 Kings 19, 9-13. Since Elijah's handicap was his fear, God was showing Elijah that God was much more powerful than little Jezebel and her puppet king. God, at a simple pass, could produce tornadoes, pillars of fire and earthquakes, and not be out of breath from the effort, hence the still small voice. Elijah didn't need to fear anything. The creator of the universe guarded his every coming and going. One final time, God had asked Elijah why he was there in the wilderness, instead of out walking in his calling. But yet again, if you read the rest of the account, Elijah complained about the difficulty of the calling, even after seeing all of that. Evidently the retraining did not work. Elijah wouldn't allow God to work inside him. He couldn't see that his purpose didn't depend on his own strength and power and wisdom, but on God's alone. The humorous element about this situation is that what Elijah was afraid of, losing his life, was exactly what he was asking God to do, to take his life, and amid the blinding sludge of fear, he couldn't see the irony of it. Satan had him by the leash, and was yanking him away from his purpose. In the end, it's sad to see, Elijah refused to continue forward with God's calling, abandoning his purpose altogether.
Breaking news.
God cannot use an unwilling person. You must be built up now, or later when you're engaged fully in your destiny, this issue will creep up again and again, and it might derail everything God is doing in your life, wasting the sphere of influence God has entrusted you. Lastly, you will never know when you'll be ready for your purpose, but God does. He will guide you by the hand, and after that, it's a leap of faith on your part. Just enjoy the preparation journey as you move forward to the promise, and try not to be impatient for the real thing, because it was in the wilderness that God performed his most miraculous acts for the Israelite people. You too will witness amazing things right here, right now.